Settlers of Catan almost doesn't need an introduction. It is the most popular Eurogame and a real classic of its genre. It's played everywhere from family get-together to Silicon Valley networking events and has really taken the gaming world by storm.
Settlers of Catan has players playing settlers on the island of Catan, where they build roads, cities, and settlements to gain access to the resources of that island. The original game is good for 3 to 4 players, and with the expansions you have enough cards and tiles to bring you up to 2 more. Depending on which expansions you use, and how long the players take in the trading phase, a game of Settlers probably will take you 1 to 2 hours.
So at the start of Settlers, the board is generated using 19 hexagonal tiles. You can either use the suggested layout in the rulebook or just arrange them randomly. Once the board has been set up, players take turns placing their first 2 settlements in rounds, with the last player placing their second settlement first and reversing the order, which makes that initial setup as fair as possible.
Each modular tile has a design and a number on it. The design gives you an indication of which resource is going to be generated by that tile. The number is the dice roll that's required to make that tile generate that resource. There are a few dots underneath the numbers. Those dots give you an indication of how likely it is that dice roll is going to happen. So 6 and 8 are most likely, 2 and 12 are least.
So at the start of their turn, each player rolls the dice to figure out which resource is going to be generated that turn. Any player who has a settlement or a city on the corner of a tile with the matching number collects that resource. Now if you roll a 7, then any player who's got 7 or more cards in their hand loses half of them, and the robber also comes into play. When the player whose turn it is places the robber on a tile, they also get to steal 1 resource from the hand of any one player with a settlement on that tile. As well, nobody gets to collect any resources from that tile until the robber has been moved.
The player then continues their turn by trading resource cards with other players in the game, building cities, settlements, and roads, and buying development cards. Cities and settlements give you access to resources, as well as getting you victory points. Building roads gives you expansion into the map, which is a very important part of Settlers. Development cards mean that the player can move the robber, gain bonuses to resource gathering or road building, and potentially get victory points as well at the end of the game.
So the first player to reach 10 victory points is declared the winner in a game of Settlers, and the game ends immediately after this has happened. There are a number of ways of generating victory points. You can build cities and settlements, you can gain achievements such as the longest road and the largest army, or you can play certain development cards that just give you victory points outright.
The strategy in Settlers is all about resources. So you try and gain as many resources as you can, as well as using the robber to block other players from gaining their resources. Another very important aspect of this game is the placement of the first 2 settlements. Oftentimes half the game is won and lost in where you place your first 2 settlements. It's hard to get access to all 5 of the resources that Catan produces with those 2 settlements, so you are going to have to figure out which resources are most important to you. Wood and brick are used a lot at the beginning of the game, whereas wheat and stone are used more when you're producing cities a little later on. Sheep are used to buy development cards, as well as to build settlements.
Along with letting you bring extra players into the game and extending the playing time somewhat, expansions such as Cities and Knights and Seafarers of Catan also give you new strategic options and ways of gaining victory points. For example, Seafarers introduces trade routes which operate similarly to roads and give you more opportunities to generate victory points.
Settlers of Catan is a great game. It's a great family group game, actually. It's got a really simple mechanic, it's very easy to learn, so that's why it's become so popular with groups of people. One negative, though, is the robber element to the game can make some people frustrated. Sometimes the robber will get stuck on a particular tile, and the player who gains a lot of resources from that tile is going to be falling behind pretty quickly in the game, so that can be kind of frustrating. If you do fall behind, oftentimes it's very difficult to catch up again. The game doesn't have a particular mechanic for catching up.
Another element of Settlers that some players might find a little bit frustrating is the fact that the resources are generated through random dice rolling. That means that, much like with the robber, certain players can just have really bad luck and start to fall behind. The other thing is that if everybody's having a bad day and the dice just hate you, then the game can really get bogged down because nobody's getting the resources that they need. Now, that trading mechanic that we mentioned earlier is a good way of mitigating both of these problems because players who can't get resources otherwise can negotiate for them with other players. It's also one of my favorite parts of the game because it really adds interactivity and means that there's never a time when you're just sitting and doing nothing during your turn. Settlers really is a great basic introductory game and a good kind of social get-together one as well.